There we go. Thank you very much, Pedro and Katlego, for joining us today. As I said, I'm excited when young people just create a round table and start to discuss issues that affect them. This is a sign that we are going somewhere, and I'm excited. For those of you that might not know who these lovely people are, Katlego is the president, SRC president of Rhodes University. That was in year 2020. And of course, she has been a student leader and still is involved in issues that concern students at this point in time. Pedro is also a former student leader, but not right now. He is lecturing at the Nelson Mandela University, so also very vested in issues that concern students. I'm excited to have them, and I know that definitely we are going to have a productive discussion. Please do invite people. If there is a friend of yours that is not yet on the stream, please do definitely get in touch with them. Just type them in the comment section, and Facebook, trust me, is loyal to inviting them. But I guess, National University Shutdown, hashtag fees must fall 2021 is what we're discussing today. And maybe just to kick off the discussion, maybe with you, Katlego, where are we coming from? When did this movement start? And, the background information, and maybe if you can just add, how did we get here where we are today? Okay, you are muted, so if you can just unmute yourself.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, thank you very much for the invite, and good evening to you, and also to SRC President Katlego. Basically, firstly, the students are basically challenging the colonial framework of these universities in South Africa, in the sense that since '94, if we remember, the state basically disinvested from funding public tertiary education in this country. And it left universities to basically self-sustain for themselves. And what they have done since then was to use student fees as the basis to center their sustainability matrix. So for universities to be sustainable, to take good care of themselves, to continue offering education, student fees became the only available resource for them to generate that kind of a revenue. And what that has done, it has made our universities in South Africa to operate with a commercial ideology, right? Where now they had to operate as similar to private entities, generate their own revenue, keep increasing these fees annually above the inflation rate. And since then, if you look at the fees now today, they basically have become totally unaffordable for the working class in this country, which is about 80% of the population in South Africa. So 80% of the population in South Africa, in terms of its income bracket, it can no longer afford tertiary education for itself, because universities have been allowed by our state to operate as private corporate entities that generate their revenue purely from student fees. Now, with that in mind, another issue with this colonial framework of these universities is this aspect of cognitive domination that they have within them. So the education that they offer to the African child is very disempowering, right? Our universities, they teach theories and ideas from one civilization, which is a Euro-American civilization of white people, and it has nothing to do with the actual African communities and the African problems where these young people are coming from, right? So you'll find that students are basically being educated for tests. So a student goes into the lecture hall, information is poured into their empty heads. They cram that information. They go write that information into the test, and then a week later they forget what they were studying in that course, right? And that kind of an education is what I call a disempowering education. You see, it does not liberate the graduate at all. It does not empower graduates to be independent, critical thinkers who can solve problems, right? Rather, it produces these docile young people who are going to go out and be servants of the market, you see. So the education that is provided in these universities, it has instances of this cognitive domination that I'm talking about. It does not liberate the mind. It does not seek to emancipate the thought processes of the students to go out in society and make a living out of themselves and be liberators and be change agents and be innovators of our society, you see. Also, these very same universities, because of their colonial framework, they also have instances of racism and patriarchization embedded within them, right? So there are many reports and instances of abuse and bullying towards women students, and the labor laws of these universities are in favor of those who hold power in the universities, right? So you'd find that when a case of abuse and sexual violence or gender-based violence that is reported by women students, the university would rather protect the misogynistic professor over the basic human rights of the student. So racism and patriarchization is deeply embedded in the colonial framework of these universities. So what students now have tabled is the whole concept of free education. And free education must not only be understood on the basis of registration fees or just a matter of cost, but there are layers of decolonization and Africanization that the concept of free education entails, right? One of them, firstly, students are basically calling for the deprivatization of these universities. They shouldn't be exclusive reservoirs of only the privileged class in society. Rather, they should be truly public African universities that seek to welcome young people from the working class and the poor backgrounds of our communities and seek to turn them around into becoming useful citizens that will develop their societies. You understand? That is the purpose of a public university. And the state that we have at the moment, it has not imbibed the criticality of that moment, because the state we have, it is still being occupied by a leadership that is trained by imperialist schools of economics and policy institutes that advance neocolonialism, whereby they look at education as an expenditure or as a wastage, right? Rather than looking at education as an asset or an investment, right? So the whole notion of neocolonialism that drives Africa basically at the moment is to see anything that is an investment to Africans as a form of debt. So if you want to build infrastructure for Africans, go take debt. If you want to take Africans to school or training, go take debt. So that whole thing of driving development programs into indebtedness is this imperialist notion of African development that our current leaders in the state have imbibed for too long. Rather, a breakaway from that notion is needed, where education now is seen as an investment in the youth. And once we see higher education as an investment in the youth, then that is where we'll begin to see it as a feasible option, where we provide free tertiary education for young people so that by 2030, 2040, and 2060, we're able to achieve the goals we've set ourselves for the continent, which is to have an industrial economy that is prosperous. And we'll only be able to achieve those things once we invest in young people. And the only way to invest in young people is to empower them with skills and education completely for free, because they come from families that cannot afford the prices that these commercial universities are charging now for access. So basically, the whole campaign for free education and the current protest that you see is a challenge by these students against this colonial framework of these universities.
Yeah, that is a deep history lesson, and I think we are learning, and I guess, you know, viewers and listeners, please do comment. We want to see your comments coming through and what you think about, you know, what the information that our panel is bringing to us. So as I am understanding, you know, it's not only about fees. There is a multiple factors that, you know, students are trying to address, but at the heart of it, it's to try and decolonize these institutions, which is really, really important. Katlego, I'm hoping that we're now with you. I can see the movement is happening fast, so I can see that it seems we are better now. Oh, you are muted. Sorry. So unmute yourself, and maybe as I just try to bring you in the discussion. Obviously, you know, you have been an SRC president, so you've worked directly with, you know, with the student, and I guess so has Pedro. But sometimes we see students protesting, and what we see is placards, what we see is burning of tires, and it's easy for us to judge, especially if you're not involved, you know, and forget that there are actually real stories and real issues behind that front. So I would like for you, especially in your term in office, what are some of these real issues and real stories, real people that you have encountered in your term of office?
Okay. Am I audible now?
Yes, you are.
Okay. I think one of the main things that I should mention is the issue of NSFAS administration. Am I audible? You guys are stuck.
Yeah. Please just go on. We can
Fredy,
hear you. Then we'll have, yes. Please just go on. We will have here and there glitches, but it's much better. Trust me. So go on.
Okay, that's good. Okay, I think one of the issues that I need to mention is the issue of NSFAS administration, which I believe has been very incompetent and hasn't been able to deliver year in, year out. The issue of fees must fall is directly connected to NSFAS, as we have seen, and we have seen that happening in 2015. In 2016, we definitely had the same issues. 2017, 18, 19, 21, we still have the same issues of fees, which is directly connected to the issue of NSFAS administration, I believe, especially because in 2020, when I was as president, a lot of issues that students would come with would be directly related to the administration of NSFAS, and we would have to constantly follow up on things that they were supposed to do, which they haven't done. And also, having looked at this year also, we are also seeing the same issue of NSFAS administration. Students not being confirmed, students not getting their allowances, like the issues keep piling up that are connected to the incompetence of NSFAS administration. So I'm not really sure if it's the capacity that is lacking or we are looking at a management problem. So that's just what I wanted to comment on at the core of these issues. And then one other thing that I want to mention is that you talked about the real stories that people are facing. I think that there's so much that people who are coming from disadvantaged backgrounds are going through. We have students who are using that money to take care of their families. And now that things have moved to virtual, their problems are even becoming more worse because we have students who don't have any network coverage. We have students who are sharing a 2-bedroom house with 6 other people. So being able to study in such an environment, it can become very problematic, like almost impossible, because you need a conducive space to be able to study. So I think the issue of moving to e-learning has worsened things as they were before. And another issue that we are facing, or we have faced while in office, is the fact that we have middle missing. What is it?
Missing middle.
Missing in middle, or some missing middle students. We have had that issue. You find that people are not able to pay, mainly because the parents are taking care of 6 other siblings who are going to high school, others are in university, and the government still expects the missing middle to be able to pay their own fees. So I think those are the issues that we are facing, and those are the issues that students are facing, those who are coming from poverty-stricken backgrounds, and also those who are coming from the missing middle background. And I would just also like to touch on what my colleague said here about the issue of institutional autonomy. I think that's one challenge that we are facing in the institution of higher learning, the issue of institutional autonomy. And the reason why I'm saying that is I want everyone to ask themselves this question of who do these universities belong to, or who are they serving? And the reason why I'm asking that is because our education, or the education that we are fighting for now, it's no longer relevant. It's no longer serving our purpose, or it's no longer serving our country. And that goes back to who are these universities really serving? Why can't the education transform in a way that we will be able to solve the problems that we are facing on a daily basis? It's very sad that most of us get our degrees and go back, sit at home, and you can't even change the community. You know, you left to go to university, you come back to the same community that hasn't changed, and you can't even change it, having someone who has consumed so much information for 3 years or 4 years. So I think that's one issue that Pedro touched on, which I like. And I don't know, I think institutions of higher learning are not what they are supposed to be. And I'm just waiting for that time where we are going to be addressing that issue of what we are learning. Is what we are learning relevant now? What is the purpose of our education now? Do we see it? We see movements that address gender-based violence, but we don't see any academics being involved in there, critiquing the issues, and also analyzing the issues, and also commenting on the policies that are being implemented in the government. So I think the issues are more deeper. We need to address this issue of education on a more deeper level than just on the fees level. So yeah.
Very, very interesting things, and I've got questions that are just coming out of those issues that you're raising. Let me just respond a little bit. Sibulelo, not happy with the subtitles, and trust me, I've been trying to remove those. It's this platform that we're using, so we're not actually on Facebook. We are on a different third-party a platform called StreamYard. We will look into, you know, seeing if at all it is possible to remove those. But we see your comment, and definitely we take note of that concern. Viewers and listeners, thank you very much. Please keep, if you have any questions that you'd like us to pose, please, I'm watching the comment section, I'm monitoring that, so please, send through the questions. And if you have not liked the page, take this opportunity to like, and if there's a friend of yours that is not yet here, please invite them. We definitely want to be with them here. Two questions that pop up, and maybe I'm going to give you guys one apiece, because there's this notion, Pedro, you spoke about, you know, the government seeing this as a liability and as an expenditure, as opposed to, you know, an investment. And there's this notion to say, if a student wants to get educated, then they need to go and borrow. Should we be looking at NSFAS being more of a scholarship, as opposed to, you know, what it is right now, as student debt, you know? And maybe when we're coming back to you, Katlego, I think I want you to get you starting to think about, there's this notion, you speak about these things that we're studying and we don't understand them, and they're not fruitful in terms of, you know, getting us into jobs. And I think the Minister of Education also spoke to that a little bit, and he's saying the problem is that we are funding students and they're going into institutions and studying things that don't add value. I just want to get your understanding of that. Should we be then funding only things that are on the critical skills list, so that we skill our learners and we skill our citizens in things that directly benefit the country? But over to you, Pedro. Should we be looking at actually making NSFAS a scholarship as opposed to what it is currently?
Yeah, thank you very much, and a good question. In my opinion, NSFAS as an entity is supposed to be abolished, completely abolished, because it is not going to achieve what we seek to achieve. as a country. And I'm talking about not only questions of poverty, but I'm talking about questions of inequality and overall development broadly. And I'll come back to that question in terms of what I mean. Firstly, you can't place your strategy of youth development and training on student loans, right? Loans have never anchored development anyway. If you go to the United States, the literature is there for us to see. They have used a financial aid system that is similar to NSFAS. And the consequences there are that every single graduate now that comes from a working class family in the United States is in debt. In fact, the student debt crisis in the United States is more than the credit card debt. So higher education in the United States, it's a commodity and a commercial industry on its own. And it keeps the poor trapped within the trenches of being poor. And that is what is going to happen in this country if we continue with the current model of funding higher education, right? So the patterns of inequality are going to be recycled if we continue in this manner. Because look at it this way. First and foremost, you have universities at the moment that are not accessible to the majority of the people who need to access them, right? The poor who come from township and village schools of our country, they don't have a good teaching environment there. They don't have a good infrastructure for them to produce top results in mathematics and physics, and even African languages, because those are the subjects you need to get into the top universities like UCT, Rhodes, Pretoria, and so on. So you have this group of people who get poor results in matric, not because of their own doing, but because of the conditions that they are in. They get poor results, and the only universities that they have access to are the poor, black, disadvantaged universities that have been engineered by colonial empire to be like that, to be teaching universities reserved for black students. And graduates from those universities, they are only reserved for the Bantustan civil service. They only compete for internships in government. Those are the graduates of Walter Sisulu and Teflon that I'm talking about. So if you pour NSFAS in that system that is grossly unequal like that, you are still going to generate the very same inequalities that you are trying to fight against. Because not only are these students receiving poor education, but they also end up having debt with them. I mean, students today with an honors or a master's degree in development studies or in anthropology or in economics, they can't find employment in this economy, right? And that's a discussion we need to have. What is the value of these qualifications that we are spending billions and millions on these young people, right? So billions are being spent. Young people are being pushed into debt because they are being given loans to study. After studying on a loan for 6 years for a master's degree in economics, what happens to you in the labor market? Does the labor market receive you properly, and are you earning proper wages to develop your family? The answer is no, right? I know of many 28-year-olds and 32-year-olds today who are frustrated with the economy of this country because the expectations they had out of universities are not being met in the real world, because the qualifications that are being offered in these universities are not in the same wavelength with the labor market, right? And that is the discussion the student movement needs to have. Yes, we see the fight to access, but what universities are you accessing? Are you really accessing universities that are going to offer you the right education to empower you? And the answer at the moment is no, because the universities we have, they operate from a commercial ideology. They are not really concerned with empowering the African child. They are only concerned with generating revenue, right? And pumping out as many graduates as possible within the framework of poor education, right? So you can study from first year up to fourth year in economics without really knowing what is happening in the economy, because what they offer you there is not in touch with the African problems that we have in our communities. You sit there, study for a test or for an exam, right? So you enroll in January, in June, you write your test. After you pass your test with a distinction, you even forget what you were taught. So with that kind of an education system, what kind of a citizens are we going to produce at the end of the day? And how do those graduates get to be in sync with what the economy and the communities require? And at the moment, there's a disequilibrium between those two things. So the question we have to answer, beyond the question of access and funding, loans and free education and so on, are these universities the best model really to achieve what we seek to achieve as far as youth development is concerned and tampering with the patterns of inequality? And the answer is no. So we have a crisis of funding to education that is grossly inadequate. We have a NSFAS entity that is mismanaged every year. We also have universities that are not offering an empowering education for young people to go out and be agents of change for themselves and their communities.
Oh, yeah, it's a mouthful. Sometimes you want to be hopeful, but it's then, you know, when you start to hear these realities, and I totally concur. And we have Tumelo Shai here who says, I completely concur with Pedro. Universities need to produce thinkers and not people who are programmed to remember the information that they are fed. Our young people are programmed to remember the information they are fed so that they may go and be in touch with the colonial economy. Any Black person who contributes to the colonial economy is regarded as civilized and educated according to the colonizer. This is something very wrong with our education system. It has commodified the knowledge and skills, etc. So I think there is definitely shared sentiments, and definitely this is very insightful. Keep the comments coming. I just want to get to you, and we're hearing these structures and layers of problems, Katlego. The question that I posed to you earlier, should we then be thinking, because one thing that I know as a foreigner and as someone that is coming from another country, is that definitely there is what they call the critical skills list, and it's easier for people to actually get permanent residence based on this critical skills list. So you have your engineers there, you have your anything to do with medical, so your nurses, your pharmacists, etc. They are all on that critical skills list. So the question is to then say, should we then be when we're talking of funding and whatever structure or model that we use, should we be then channeling this funding towards funding solely critical skills? And I guess that then leaves a whole population of people, because, you know, our people are not yet ready. Please, can you just speak to that a little bit?
Thank you very much for that. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay. I think it was quite amusing to listen to the minister saying that students must take courses that what did he say? He said something about the courses that will give them the job, you know. And the question that I asked myself was, which job is there? Because the economy is also even failing. A lot of graduates have degrees that were rare skills, or the skills were needed, but they're still sitting at home. Now we can see graduates with boards written engineering. I have engineering degree, or I have honors in this and that, and I'm looking for a job. So you ask yourself, which courses is he talking about that we should be pursuing that will be guaranteeing us jobs after we're done with university or any higher education certificate? So now the minister also in his address has mentioned that they have cut off some of the courses, which is LLB, which is your B.Ed, and which made me wonder what would happen next year. Are we going to have more courses being chopped off from the NSFAS program? And like how long is that going to be, and to what extent is it going to get? So that's just something that I'm interested in, and I'm waiting to see what will happen in terms of more courses being chopped off the NSFAS program, which is something I'm anticipating. And you also mentioned that there are some rare skills. Those rare skills, we have had a lot of people trying to study towards that. For example, pharmacy used to be a rare skill. I did pharmacy, and a lot of people also did pharmacy, but they're still sitting at home with no job. We have a lot of students who are sitting with no internship placements, mainly because some of the job posts are freezed, or also mainly because the market is too congested now. There are no more pharmacists who are needed as before. So we are going to be a lot of rare skills sectors that will be filled. And then what is going to happen after that? What is going to happen, really? We are going to have more graduates sitting at home. We are going to have more students fighting to get access to institutions of higher learning. After that, getting out of that system, but still not being able to make a living. So it still goes back to what Pedro was saying. What are these universities like? What are we doing in this institution of higher learning? Because we are unable to solve the problems that we are facing on a daily basis. I would like to believe that the main purpose of our education was so that we can improve our lives, to constantly seek solutions to the problems that we are facing in our daily lives. So for these institutions to start producing knowledge that students can apply in their daily lives, is so they need to move from the profit-based narrative, as Pedro said, because now universities are only focusing on what is needed in the job market now, not what is needed in our society. So in order for us to be able to get that from the university, then they need to start moving away from this profit narrative. I think that's when we would be able to produce graduates who are able to think for the solutions of the situations or the problems that we are facing as a society or as a country. I made another point. One other point that I'm interested in touching on is what is going to happen post-COVID-19. I think I was a bit excited when COVID-19, like how interested in seeing how COVID-19 would affect the education sector and how we would respond to COVID-19 and how our education sector would look post-COVID-19, because I thought that was an opportunity for our education system to transform. But having looked at how things are now that we are slowly adjusting to this pandemic, things are still remaining the same. Nothing is changing. So like it's quite sad to see that we don't see any kind of transformation in the institutions of higher learning, the transformation that will be beneficial to the society and beneficial to everyone in this country. So yeah, to answer your question, I don't know. I don't think we will have rare skills anymore. It's almost like South Africa is waiting for another country to introduce something so that we can take it from there. So we keep taking from other countries and we are not coming up with anything for ourselves that is going to be suitable for our problems. So yeah, I think we will keep cutting off courses and we won't have rare skills needed anymore because, yeah.
Advocate Owen Magocha coming in and saying, yes, Fredy, how does a country import skills, labor for degrees that they are locally producing? I think that's a very valid point, and I think we actually had a lot of uproar when the doctors from Cuba came, medical doctors, whilst we have our very own medical doctors in South Africa that are still sitting at home. So it starts to really question even this critical skills list that we are referring to say, is it authentic? Again, Advocate Owen Magocha coming in and saying that the current academic curriculum was built to fail. Many academic courses must be banned as they are irrelevant to this day and age. They are irrelevant to the things that we are facing as an African continent, and in particular as South Africans. Tebolo also coming in, we need an education system that responds to the problems that we are facing as a people. We need curriculum that is developed around ideals of problem solving. I think those are all very powerful people. Keep those comments coming. And as I come to you, Pedro, there is this notion, and I think in a statement by the South African Union of Students, they mentioned that the austerity measures that were being mentioned as the budget speech was being given, and cuts were happening to the higher education system, and the support that universities get was being reduced. Essentially, they say that was essentially an insult to what we are trying to create, this society that is mindful of our youths, developing our youths. And an argument that comes is to say maybe we are in the middle of a pandemic and everyone is just getting cuts everywhere. My question is to say to you, may you please just enlighten us a little bit more. Where should this money be coming from?
Yeah, thank you very much. Look, the question of the pandemic and the effect it has had on the resources of the state is not a discussion really that the working class should entertain too much, because what you choose to invest in as a government is a question of a policy choice, right? So this government knows that a pandemic has happened and many families therefore have lost jobs, right? It knows that it is a country that has high levels of unemployment and poverty, and it knows that it has a deep-seated challenge of gender-based violence. I mean, there are so many issues that this government is aware of. Now, instead of sitting down and prioritizing those developmental issues as a developmental state, it chooses to install austerity measures on developmental programs that are meant to liberate the working class in this country. So after a pandemic, first and foremost, there should be mass investment in higher education, because not only are families pushed now to the margins of the economy, but even people who are currently in the labor force, they've also been de-skilled and retrenched from the economy. So you need, therefore, to look at education as an asset, as an investment that is going to generate those returns for the country to go back to recovery. So you need to invest in the training of workers, right? Because now there's an influx of technological skills that are needed after the pandemic. So you need to train people who are currently in the workforce to acquire new skills so that they can be productive and sustainable in their places of employment. And even beyond that, they should be able to be self-sustainable for themselves, even if they lose employment. So when a person loses employment, they should have means and the skills necessary to rebuild their lives from the education that they've acquired from society. So amongst the higher education sector, there should have been increases rather in higher education and also in basic education, especially in the fields of African languages, mathematics, science, and the humanities, right? Because you see, the reason why we're going to keep on inviting doctors from Cuba to come and deal with pandemics in this country, it is because the curriculum of our medical schools is not engineered to provide community healthcare. It's engineered to provide individual client healthcare assistance, because we see medicine as a commodity in this country. So individual patients who are on medical aids, we structure our healthcare system according to the demand and supply that comes from the equilibrium matrix of medicine. So if you look at the private hospitals that we have, if, for an example, in Port Elizabeth, you have 2,000 people who are on medical aid, the private hospitals in the city are going to design beds according to that amount of consumers they have in the medical aid scheme. And that kind of modeling of medicine does not work when it comes to a pandemic now that affects the entire community in the country. And that is what Cuba has been able to invest in. It has been able to invest in preventative healthcare that touches base with the entire community in the event that there are pandemics, right? So the program of taking our young people to go train for medicine in Cuba is well and good and feasible. That's fine. But we need to develop our own capability now within the country using the developmental state to build new medical schools now that are going to provide community-wide and preventative healthcare, which is what we're trying to do at Nelson Mandela University, where we are building a medical school in the Missionville campus that is inside the townships, because we want to provide community healthcare that will be accessible to poor communities of our province, right? So those kinds of mechanisms are what are supposed to be in place if you are a developmental state that looks at investment in social services as an asset for the future. So the working class is correct to organize. The students must organize and fight against these austerity measures, right? The workers and the students, they need to see themselves in the very same basket, because the post-COVID higher education model is coming to students in a very brutal manner. It seeks to exclude, it seeks to make sure that those who are poor are kept outside the gate from accessing higher education. I mean, I saw an article written by the Vice Chancellor of UCT, Wits University and Rhodes, where they speak about a hybrid learning higher education model after COVID. The student movement must question that nonsense, because at the center of that program is to ensure that universities generate maximum revenue from a minimum input. Is now they want to offer higher education and training to students without researchers and teachers. They want students to come and be taught by videos, so that at the end of the day, full fees are paid, yet the service that the university is supposed to offer to students is limited. So you will never have quality education and proper public engagement without academics and researchers engaging consistently with students to conscientize them to go out there and be public servants in the future. You see? So so students who are Black, students who come from the working class, whether you are at Wits University or you come from Forte University, both of you as Black students, you are suffering from the belly of the same beast, right? Because it is colonial empire that separated and categorized these universities to be the way they are. Rhodes, Wits, and so on, privileged white research institutions because they were reserved for white people under colonialism. Forte and Walter Sisulu are disadvantaged teaching universities because that is how colonial empire structured them, right? So colonialism, the colonial framework, is responsible for how our higher education model is structured. Now, the student movement needs to be conscious of those divisions and seek to rise above them and seek to dismantle the whole system and unite as a movement to fight for a quality public African university that is going to provide qualitative education for humanity, not for profits, for the market or for revenue. But on the next question, I'm going to touch on TVET colleges as well, because when we speak about the higher education sector, we tend to focus on these elite corporate universities and forget about the training vocational colleges that we have in the country, which should be crucial assets to provide us with the skills and training we need to liberate everybody. For an example, quickly, just a last comment, just a quick comment, Chair, before you move on to the next speaker, the next question. 12 million young people in this country are not in any education training or education enrollment or in any employment. 12 million young people, right? Yet our universities only offer spaces for 1 million students, right? So close to 10 million young people have no access to training whatsoever in this country. Yet this government is putting on the table NSFAS into universities as a mechanism to train young people and reverse inequality. It's not going to work. The best mechanism that is going to work, that is going to accommodate every young person in this country, is to have training colleges that are going to be based in our communities, right? Where people are going to receive skills, whether they have matric or not, right? Whether you have matric or not, you must have access to community-based training colleges that are going to offer latest skills for people to go out there and empower themselves and their communities. That is a mass-based education and training program that is going to work, and that is the one that will touch base with each and every young person that is out there in society. Universities, my brother, have never been a feasible model to address inequality, because universities are institutions of minorities and of the elite. Rather, community-based colleges and workplace training institutes are the ones that should be funded and channeled by a developmental state. Invest in these communities so that each and every person who wants to empower their lives, they have access to skills training, whether they pass matric or not.
One thing that I should just say is that you guys let me use our language as young people, but you guys are slapping. And it leaves us wondering why as well young people are not in these spaces of decision making, because we have the ideas and we start to really question to say, if this is our future that these Madalas are making, and they're preparing a future for us, and we are not actively involved, then we are up for doomsday. Katlego, I saw you writing not a little bit on this comment when I was putting this comment on TVET colleges on the screen. Do you have something to add onto that just before we move on?
I just want to comment on the issue of the one that was mentioned by Pedro, of having community-based colleges. And I think that is something that was attempted, or I'm not sure if it's still operating, but by the way of things, look,
Okay, you're cutting off a little bit. You are now. Let's see if you can, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay. I was saying that this is one of the programs that I've growing up, I was made aware of. And those schools used to be called ABET, I think, ABET College. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, Pedro. But those used to be colleges where people who don't have matric, like whether you have matric or not, you can go to that college and be trained. Like it was a skill training college, and it used to be under the basic education sector, but now it has been moved to DHET. So, but one sad reality is that those colleges are not operating. They're not operation, and I think that is mainly because of maladministration and also the lack of political will. I don't think our leaders have the political will to improve advantage people. Fredy, we've had 500 billion looted, like 500 billion looted under our watch, publicly so. So which shows that our leaders do not care anymore at all about anything. And I don't know, sometimes I think maybe young people, we are still comfortable with what is happening in the country. I don't know, mainly because I don't think a lot of us are actually voicing out what is happening now. We just have fees must fall movement, okay, but a lot of us are unemployed and we are not even saying anything about that. So at some point, it makes me wonder if we are still comfortable with what is happening in our country. So the other thing that makes me express the fact that there's no political will in making sure that these colleges are still operational is because we have politicians involved in everything, and they're involved in what they don't. For example, we have seen with the issue of vaccines, we don't have any pharmacists saying anything about the vaccines. which makes you wonder, like, how are we being equipped at school? Are we only being equipped to be workers, or we are being equipped to be able to deal with our daily situation? So we've also seen how South Africa has been quiet with the research of vaccines, like having to research like the whole research of vaccines. Like countries were busy trying to find a vaccine for COVID-19, but South Africa was waiting. So it made me wonder, what are those institutions there for? Are we even capable of researching and coming up with a vaccine for COVID-19? So those are some of the questions that I asked myself during this whole pandemic, and also when Pedro was giving his response. And I do believe that there's money available for education. Free education is very much feasible. There's just a lack of political will from our leaders. We have seen how the SAA has been bailed out. How many times? I've even lost count of how many times it has been bailed out. We have the events that are so huge. Like, for example, the State of Nation address. I don't know what was celebrated, like the budget cuts. I don't see that as something that was supposed to be celebrated, especially because that is one event that was like those, you know, the USA events, red carpets, let's dress up and everything, you know. So those are some of the things that we are supposed to be cutting. We are supposed to be cutting budgets, or not education. We need to be able, the government needs to be able to recover the corruption funds. A lot of money has been looted, and I believe that money, if it can be recovered, then it can be put into good use, such as redirecting it to fund education. And we've also seen how our cabinet is very big in South Africa. We have too many deputy ministers. We have too many vice, and we just have a lot of ministers who are not necessary. We don't see what is happening or what they are doing in their own sectors. So I think money is there. Not I think, I believe money is there to fund education. It's just that there's a lack of political will from our leaders, and corruption and mismanagement of funds and lack of accountability. So there's just a whole lot in our government that is not benefiting any one of us. So, yeah.
You have answered a question that I just wanted to hit you with, and I'll just read it out so that people know that, you know, when we start talking about university clearing the historical debt, and this is now said to be around 13 billion of the money that amounts in student debts. So the question was to say, is it feasible? Who takes the knock? And I think you have already started to answer that question. As we are now really, I think with your permission, the panel, I'm just asking you for 15 minutes more of your time so that we can just conclude this discussion very nicely. Is that okay? Pedro, are you still fine? Okay, great. So I think I'm just going to quickly move to you, Pedro, and the question is to say, Umthokoze Sintumba, and may his soul rest in peace, was unfortunate to be caught up in the protest and killed on the first day when the protest started. The question is that, do we have a problem with our security system, and especially when it comes to the way that they respond to students when we protest, in fact, to all protests altogether?
Is that to me or to Katlego?
Yes, to you, Pedro. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. No, the security apparatus of the state it still resembles the contours of colonialism, where it sees women and Black people as objects of abuse, you know, as basically as commodities to exploit on a daily basis. So until the apparatus of the state in terms of security is decolonized, then we're going to keep having these problems that we have. In fact, the whole architecture of the post-apartheid model, it is structured around ensuring that the citizens are being whipped into line, right? So they seek to make sure that the citizenry lives in this false notion of a democracy, whereas we are not, but rather we are being made to obey the laws of the land through force, you see. So women, they know that when they have to face the state on issues of sexual violence or gender-based violence, they have no confidence whatsoever in their cases being realized in the current model of the post-apartheid state that we have. Even the working class, when it protests, Black people, when they involve themselves in mass action, they know that there's a possibility of death that they're going to face from this state. And this refers to students and workers, you know. Marikana showed us what happens to Black workers when they demand a minimum wage. 2015 and last week showed us when Black students are demanding a basic right to education. So the state that we have is highly violent, deeply colonial, right? It has deeply entrenched instances of patriarchization and racism embedded within its operations. And it is only a concerted effort of decolonizing the state, right? Of removing this post-apartheid ANC state from the contours of empire. And that is when finally we would have a state now of the people that is concerned about their safety and their basic rights.
Yeah. Oh, powerful. I think powerful statement there. I'm going to just swiftly move to you, Katlego, and I just wanted to say that there are a few students, and I'm going to just put this in quotes to say largely privileged, that think that, you know, the protests are a disruption to the academic agenda. And they would rather have, you know, the academics, the academic year proceed, and they are viewing this as really a disruption. What would you say to them? And I know that you spoke earlier, it might be you or Pedro, about, you know, student body coming together.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. I think one thing that we are aware of is that the system managed to classify us in a way that we are so disconnected from each other as Black people and as people of South Africa in general. We don't understand what we can't relate what is happening to the other person, you know. Now you find that there's a student who has nothing, you know, who is depending on NSFAS, who basically has nothing, you know. And then we have one who gets an allowance of 10,000 per month, you know. That student can't relate. Even when you're on the street chanting fees must fall and all of that, they genuinely can't relate. And that's because we are in classes. So we in having those classes within the Black community, that has led to us as a community losing that aspect of Ubuntu, and we are now in competition with each other. If now, for example, let's say, for example, at an institute, as a certain institution, they only taking 30 LLB students from the undergrad level. They're taking 30. And now there's only 15 who are in class, and then 20 more, they are in a protest. And that is good for me, who is in class, because there's no competition. So we are constantly in competition with each other. And that is why we are unable to relate to each other's struggles, and we are unable to support each other, be in solidarity with each other in our struggle. And I think what we are failing to realize, especially the privileged student, is that we have a common enemy, which is a government that is incompetent. And at the end, it will catch up with all of us, whether you're in class or you're protesting for fees to fall. It will catch up with all of us. And I think the conversation that we've had, the whole conversation that was focusing on our education not being relevant to us, is that it will catch up with all of us, whether you're in class or you're not in class. You get a degree and you don't get a job at the end of your degree. And those who are lucky, those who are more privileged, you find that they have companies at their home, or their other friends or relatives or whoever have companies, so they can easily get employment under immediately when they are done with their degrees. So I think for those who are still privileged enough to be able to afford fees. I don't know what to say to them, because you can never force someone to understand or to be in solidarity with your struggles. But I don't know. I'm just appealing to them to try and understand what is happening. You know, why people are protesting, and understand the issues that come with that. And I don't think anyone likes protesting. Students don't like protesting. No one wants to be on the street. We all want this education. We all want to be able to provide solutions to the society, you know, through this education. But now, if some of us are able to have access to it and others are unable to, and we are unable to see a disconnect like in that, then it's a problem. I think that disconnect is what is causing us to not relate to each other, which is classism. So, but yeah, at the end of the day, we have one common enemy, which is incompetent government that will have us having a failing state at the end of the day. So, yeah.
Yeah. A great book says, "My people have perished because of lack of knowledge," and others then come up and speak about knowledge and say knowledge is power. So if we can just, you know, walk in our peers' shoes for a day and learn what they are going through, educate ourselves of these issues that you know, are being brought to the fore and the reason why they are in the streets, that would be better. Start looking at our privilege and look at it as a benefit and as an instrument that we can use to so use privilege as an instrument to help others that don't necessarily have that privilege that you have. I think valid points that you are bringing to the fore. As we are really pedaling towards the end, Pedro, we are living in moments of history, and let me say this, young people, and it's not, oh, we've just lost him. Maybe I'm going to just pose that question to you to say that we are living in moments of history where, you know, with this protest and everything happening, fees must fall from 2015, it started 2016, we've gained momentum. What are some of the positive lessons, Katlego, that we can take from this movement as a whole? If you can just unmute yourself. Oh, there we have, he's back. And we'll just add him to the stream. Go ahead, Katlego, and I think Pedro will just add points where you would have left off.
I think one important thing that we can learn is unity is really power. We have seen what happened in 2015. The results of the Fees Must Fall movement, they were quite impressive, I can say. And that is because we were united as students, whether you are Black, whether you are colored, whether you, like, everyone was involved, and the power of unity. And I think what we can take as a society is that if we can be united as one, the same goal and the same vision, then we can definitely achieve those as a country or as a society. That's what I have personally learned from this movement, that unity is power, especially because looking at our history, we have been separated so many times. Like, the system has separated us, as I've mentioned before, and it's constantly trying to separate us. But when we come together, we can definitely achieve a lot as a country.
Yeah. Before we are Zulu or Xhosa, we are South Africans. Before we are rich and poor, we are South Africans. We are human, and that should unite us. Pedro, lessons that we can draw from the Fees Must Fall movement as a whole.
Yeah, no, just last comment from me. I completely agree with Katlego in terms of the unity of the working class that was anchored in 2015 needs to be advanced further. This involves the unity between the students and the workers, right? Because vice chancellors are very united with the state. The state provides them with police who are going to disengage students, who are going to bully students, who are going to arrest students for demanding their basic rights. So workers and students, they need to be united like they were in 2015, right? Because the reason why the student cannot afford tertiary education at the moment, it is because the wages that are being earned by the worker are very poor, right? So the student and the worker, the entire working class family in South Africa is facing austerity measures as a whole, and it needs to unite, organize, and fight against this system until we have a public African university that is concerned about the development of humanity, that offers quality education for our people, not the one we have now that is concerned about the market and generating profits out of exploiting South African families and the students. So that is the message I have for the student movement and the labor movement moving ahead in this struggle to acquire free tertiary education in this country.
Unity, unity, unity. Let's just tie it at that knot. And I would really want to just thank you, our panel, for just coming and shedding light. I was learning in the process, and I guess this is the reason why we have such a platform, so that we can share knowledge, precisely so that we can create a pool or a community of young people that are informed, young people that are engaged, and that young people that can, you know, go forward and be agents of change. To those in power, one thing that we should be saying is that young people today have exhibited knowledge, and we have been seeing it as they have been just, you know, pushing it. And we want to see more young people as policymakers. If it is our future that you are preparing, then young people, more young people should be decision makers, should be policymakers, should be in government, so that we can really start curating the future that we want. We want to thank you, our viewers and followers, for just giving us this moment to be with us. Nigiwe, we see you watching from Massachusetts in the United States of America. Thank you for joining us. Tumelo Shai saying education is not a luxury, but a necessity. Thank you very much for coming and being with us and for engaging, you know, the topic. It is really encouraging to see you engage. If you have not liked the page, please do like the page. And if there are friends of yours that were not on this live stream, then definitely please do invite them, share it. If you're watching it afterwards, share it as well. Thank you very much, Katlego. Thank you very much, Pedro. This was awesome. This is not the first, and this is the first, but definitely not the last. Definitely, Katlego, you are here for the second time, and we hope to see more of you. And Pedro, this is your first, but definitely we hope to see more of you.
Thank you very much for the invite, Fredy.
Yeah, brother. Thanks, Katlego. Thanks, President.
Thank you. From us here at Young Aspirations, thank you and good night.